again, this is Mike from Toy Train Tips and Tricks, and today we're continuing our series on planning a layout. Step one was to evaluate your space, to realistically look at, well, how much space you have. Part two, keeping that information in mind, translating that into a track plan and benchwork. So keeping in mind that everyone's layout is going to be different. Everyone has different needs and different wants and what they're looking for in a layout. I'm going to walk you through the steps that I did to work on my new layout, which is now about a year old, and in the steps that I took. And so you can apply those to planning your own layout, whether it's your first layout or whether it's expansion of your current layout. So keeping in mind what I learned in step one, my obstacles were, first of all, a need for storage. We moved into a much smaller house with much less storage space. Our previous house had a large two-car garage and a large outdoor shed and a much bigger basement. This house, smaller basement, no garage, no outdoor storage. We needed to find a place for more of our stuff inside. So the layout room, in addition to being for the trains, also has to double as a storage space. I also have some obstacles in the room to work around. I have an electric meter, electric panel. I have a door that I need to have access to the furnace in case of repairs or replacement. And I have some built-in shelves that I need to work around. So all of these play into my track plan and my plan for my bench work for this layout. So when you start this idea of track planning and bench work, you need to break down, make a list of what I call your gotta-haves and your wanna-haves. The gotta-haves are the things I absolutely need to have my layout do this, this, and this in order for me to enjoy the layout. And then the wanna-haves are, well, I'd like to have this, but I can live without it if I have to. So for me, and again, this is going to be different for everybody, the gotta-haves for my plan were, first of all, I needed space. I needed storage space incorporated into the train room. Secondly, I'm on a cheap budget, so I'm working with things that I already have, inexpensive building materials, cutting corners, not so much on quality, but using as much of the existing items that I already have. I've got to work, as I already said, with storage. I've got to work within my existing space. But what I want to have, I got to have at least two main lines. I want to see at least have the capacity to run at least two trains at the same time. On my wanna-haves, well, we always want the longest possible run for our trains. Running around in a circle doesn't entertain us for very long, so the biggest main lines possible. I really want a multi-track yard with a yard lead if possible. That allows you to do switching without interfering with the trains on the main line. I really wanted to incorporate my number 2317 drawbridge. This was a key element of my previous layout. It was a really neat feature, drew a lot of attention and kept operators occupied. I really want to incorporate that into the new layout. I also wanted to incorporate my Carrera Go set. The kids' slot cars were also an integral part of the previous layout. It made a nice scenic effect in using both the trains and the cars in the same layout. It really generated a lot of interest. So I wanted to have that if possible. Also, my gotta-haves, I've got to have an independent track where the fat wheel Marx locomotives that I have could operate. This is less of a problem now as I have found a way to make the Marx turnouts compatible with more modern equipment, as you see in a previous video, but that was a concern. I needed the space for operating accessories. I have a Lino milk car, a cattle car, some dump cars, a mail car. I wanted places where these operating cars could work. And I wanted it to be fast and easy to build. I wanted to get the trains running quickly. So with these considerations in mind, I moved forward into the track planning aspect. And to help me do this, I used a track planning tool called SCARM, Simple Computer Assisted Railroad Modeler. This program is a free download. I'll include the link in the description to this video. After a really quick tutorial, it's pretty easy to use. It includes a library of both Lionel and Marx track, which is useful for me not only for the turnouts, but I like to use Mark's 034 curves as well as Lionel 027 and 042. So having that option made it easier to do the track planning. And it has a nice 3D modeling feature where you can, look at, a kind of a 3D idea of what the layout will look like. And that led me to my first plan. Now, this first plan was a simple 4x8. My idea was to avoid all of the problems with the outside of the room by putting a 4x8 in the center of the room. And so let's look at the plan and let's change the view here. Add some scenery. There we go. All right, so we have an outside loop that is 042 track that's here on the bottom. Let me get rid of this. There, so you can see it. There's the 042 loop around the outside. So that takes care of one of my 1/2. Here on the inside, this loop has some 027 turnouts and a combination of 027 and 034 curves. So it's not super tight with all 027. It has some 034s here and here. So there's my second loop. I now have 2 main lines. Do I have places for my operating accessories? Yes, I have a spot for a dump bin up here for the operating dump cars. I have this for the operating cattle car, and I have this platform for the operating mail car, the milk car, things like that. I've got a switch tower. I've got places for a passenger platform, and I've got this elevated section up here where I could put some buildings, a little bit of scenery up here. And I have an upper loop that would be all with Mark's turnouts, or actually I considered using Sakai turnouts here. They're kind of unusual, but they work the same way, allowing fat wheel operation. I was going to use that for a third train. So here in a 4x8 space, I have a plan that gives me some limited switching options and sacrifices space for action, giving me 3 train operation in a small space. But what it doesn't do is, let's take a look at our 1/2 and our gotta haves. So on the gotta haves, it fits in the space, yes. Cheap budget, 4x8, easy to build. Here's the problem. It doesn't address my storage. In order to have access to all areas of the 4x8, both sides, again, I like to have a 30-inch minimum aisle for access. So having my 4 feet plus 30 inches on each side only left me about 18 inches for shelves on either side. And that was just not going to be enough. I did have my 2 main line minimum. I actually had 3 main lines. I didn't get any of my 1/2. There's no bridge. It's not a very long run. I don't have a yard. I don't have a place for the Carrera Go. I did have a place for the fat wheel track. I did have a space for the operating accessories, and it would be fast and easy, and I had a 042. But the main problem was I did not have space for the storage. So, not meeting that basic design problem of storage space, I moved on to plan B. The second plan was to build an around-the-wall layout. I would work on, the table would be built above the built-in shelving, but below the electrical boxes, there was room to fit it. I was going to make individual 30-inch wide by tables no more than 68 inches long, some of them shorter, bolted together, 6 tables in total, but they were bolted together to be easily removed in case of maintenance or remodeling or anything I needed to do in that space. This would allow me to put a 30-inch wide storage shelf under each layout section. So each table would have both the layout top and a 30-inch wide shelf and storage on the floor underneath. And I would access the interior of the layout through a drop gate. So this around the walls idea led me to this plan. And let's change the view here so you can see some scenery. And what we came up with this time is I have a large 042 main line around the outside. I have a large 027 and 034 track around the inside. So there's my 2 train operation. I have a multi-track yard. I was not able to get that yard lead in here. I tried the switches several different ways, couldn't make the yard lead fit, but I do have my multi-track yard, which also serves as a place for my operating accessories. I have a place for my 2317 drawbridge. It's not on a main line, it's on a siding, but still there's some operating possibilities with that over here. Most importantly, I have my storage underneath all of these sections, and there we go. And I access the interior through this drop leaf. So this plan is what I went with. I made some minor changes along the way. First of all, note over here in the yard, while the track geometry in the SCARM is right for the track itself, for the turnouts, it does not make accommodation for the bases and the switch motors. And so using the stock Lionel or Marks turnouts, you can't quite get them as close together as it's shown here. I needed to add fitter sections, small straights in between each one, which changed the geometry over here a little bit. It made me move this to actually on the drop leaf section. So it changed the geometry over here, and it significantly changed the geometry over here. With where this is located, this swings much farther out. The drawbridge is over here with the trestle, and I was able to add a hidden track under here as well. After I built the layout, I did have this siding in for a while. I later took this out, allowing me to take out this 027 section, making a nice wider curve along here, which gives me not only a wider curve, but allows me to put a passenger station in here with an unobstructed view. Makes this kind of a focal point scenically when the layout is finished right here. And I added another siding right in here as well, since this track was moved farther back. So how does this plan work with my gotta haves and wanna haves? Well, on the gotta haves, it fits in my space. The budget is still cheap because it uses materials that I already have. It meets the storage requirement, unlike the first plan. I still have my 2 mainline minimum, so good all over here. On my wanna haves, I have a considerably longer run. I have my multi-track yard. I didn't get my yard lead, but I have the multi-track yard. The drawbridge is incorporated, although not as part of a main line. It is on a siding, but it's still there. The Carrera Go didn't really fit on the main part of the layout. My plans were to eventually build an upper level on this side, as you can see here. It's all under tunnel. And I was going to put the Carrera Go on this upper level with a small piece of track as well. I ended up scrapping that idea because I was running out of time, really. It was taking me too long. So I moved the Carrera Go set to one of the storage shelves below the layout. So it's not really incorporated in the layout. It's in the same space, but it's not, the cars and the trains do not interact with one another. I think the kids are starting to outgrow the slot cars anyway, so this may not be a huge problem. The gotta haves, it works with my fat wheel track. My inner loop was all set up with Marks turnouts. I have space for the operating accessories in the yard. It was going to be a fast and easy build. Put up the tables, put up the loops of track, and then add more stuff later. And one of my main lines is 042 or larger. The outside loop is all 042 track, except for the switch turnouts. But the main line itself is 042. So building this with my Benchwork, I used a tabletop design, not a lot, really no elevation changes except for the trestle going to the drawbridge. So I could build a flat tabletop design. I used 5/8 inch MDF board because I found a bunch of this at my local Habitat for Humanity restore for really inexpensive. This is the kind of stuff that is underlayment for kitchen countertops. So it is thick, it is strong, and in my case, it was great because it was cheap. My basic tabletop height is 42 inches. That puts it above the built-in shelves, but underneath my electrical boxes. That also allows me to put shelves underneath with plenty of clearance for 18 by 30 storage bins. I use 2x3s for the outside frame and legs, And I also use 2x3s for the lateral braces that are a maximum of 15 inches apart, sometimes closer depending on the length of the table. You could probably get by with 1x3s for this, but the COVID lockdown had already started, and I couldn't find any 1x3s. As a matter of fact, I ended up clearing 2 of our local hardware stores out of all of the 2x3s that they had, and I couldn't find 1x3s anywhere. So it's a little overbuilt with 2x3 braces. The lower shelf provides the leg support because it's identical in dimensions to the top, but it is 21 inches from the shelf top to the tabletop, which gives plenty of clearance, not only for the 2x3s, but for up to 18 inches of storage bin on the shelves, and then also storage underneath. And the 6 tables are bolted together for easy removal for maintenance issues that may pop up in the basement as we go along. There are other popular options for how to build benchwork. One would be an open grid design. Using this, you generally use a 1x4 frame. You could use 2x4s, but 1x4 is generally strong enough. Around the outside perimeter, make a rectangle, then put 1x4 braces across the rectangle every 12 to 15 inches, depending on how strong you want the top to be. And then use 1x4 risers to connect this frame to the underside of your track road bed, which typically would be plywood that is cut to the shape of the track. This allows for easier elevation changes. You basically lay the track out on your plywood, trace the shape of it, and cut out that shape, and then use 1x4s to adjust the height of the track at different places. So again, the open grid design is very useful for layouts with when you have multiple elevations of track. It just makes it easier to accommodate those. And another popular benchwork design for model railroaders is the tried and true L girder option. Similar in concept to the open frame, but instead of having the outside rectangular frame, you build L girders. You take 2 1x4s, put them at 90 degrees in the shape of an L, and connect them that way, making a single girder. Put 2 of those across, usually at around 30 to 36 inches, again, depending on how wide the area is that you're framing in. Then lay 1x4 braces across the top of these girders, every, again, 12 to 15 inches, depending on how much strength you want. And then again, using 1x4 risers to go up to your cookie cutter road bed, just like with the open frame, the open grid framework. And again, 2x4 legs. And this allows not only for easier elevation changes, but also if you, instead of having the tabletop look of rectangles, if you have more curves and other cutouts in the perimeter of your layout, the L girder, by allowing you to change the length of the cross braces and how far out they overhang, makes it easier to get those nice gentle curves. So that is also a popular option among model railroaders. So that's how I did my track planning and how I did my bench work for my layout. In part 3, we're going to cover some of the basics of wiring and electrical. We'll talk about command control versus conventional control, cab control versus block control, and a few other tidbits about wiring up your basic layout options that you have for wiring and operating your layout. So again, thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative. Like it, share it, subscribe, tell your friends and tell your neighbors, and keep those trains running. We'll see you in the next episode here on Toy Train Tips and Tricks.